Hey, welcome back to the channel. I'm out here today in the fields and pastures out in the Hurricane Valley. I mentioned to you that when the canal was built, it made possible to irrigate and farm over 2,000 acres in this valley. So I've brought you out to one of these farms today in one of the fields. You can see it behind me. And I've also brought with me the man, the myth, and the legend. This is Casey Lofthouse. Casey has a YouTube channel. Check it out if you haven't had a chance. It's called Casey's Off-Road Recovery. Casey owns some property out here, some family property, and he's gonna take us through and walk us down and show us the irrigation and how it works and what it's provided for this valley. So stay right with us and we'll get you started on it. So when you come in an irritable farmland where water's been running, you have to dress a certain way. You gotta dress the part to be a farmer. So I've got Casey here. Casey, you want to show us what you got on?
You know, you got to have your mucking boots on, or your milking boots, or whatever you want to call them. But there's nothing like a pair of white boots down here in the summer heat of southern Utah. So these keep your feet cooler than the black boots that Daniel's wearing.
That's right. You can see my boots right there. That's just to keep us dry because we're about to walk through a pasture that's being irrigated. You know, the Hurricane Canal, as we mentioned earlier in the video, started in 1891 and completed in 1904. And it opened up a long stretch. The canal was about 7.5 miles long, but I mentioned that it brought water into the valley. Today I'm going to show you this water source. As I mentioned, Casey being one of these farmers that owns water shares and water rights in the area. We're going to talk about that. We're going to show you the irrigation ditches, what they were designed for, and that they're still around today, and a little bit on the history of it. This is what some of the field looks like. This is Casey's personal farm, and you can see there's water running through it. Well, how does all that come? When you go out east, they don't rely on irrigation like this. They don't need sprinkler systems to water their fields. But out here in the desert, water is scarce and the ground is hard and parched, and you need to irrigate in some way. And so Casey, why don't you tell us a little bit about it and maybe show us the ditches and what you do?
So yeah, southern Utah is kind of unique in its availability of water on the desert. When they built the Hurricane Canal, they actually opened up about 2,000 acres of land that they were able to develop. And so they put 2,000 acre feet of water in the Hurricane Canal Company when they founded it. It takes about 1 acre foot, it takes about 5.8 to 6 acre feet of water per year to irrigate an acre of farm ground. So about every 14 days we get what they call an irrigation turn, and it comes and they give us a lot of time depending on how many acres we're irrigating. And it takes about 1 inch of water every 14 days to keep ground in production and growing. And it's amazing that it can even stay alive in the summer heat in 14 days of irrigation. So we get that. So to explain what an acre foot of water is, an acre foot of water is 1 foot of water on an acre of ground. And you need that much water in a year during the growing season to keep it sustainable. The Hurricane Canal Company, as mentioned, was diverted 7.5 miles upstream at the diversion dam in a spot called the Narrows, and they built it along the shelf going out of the Virgin River Gorge onto the bench. And they were able to build dirt ditches all dug by hand, and mules. Dynamite, I'm sure, was used, which was probably a good time. But today, a lot of the dirt ditches have been replaced with concrete. So the ditch here behind us has been in use since 1960. So it's been running water and irrigating this farm ground in the exact same manner for 65 years. And it's just amazing to see how they leveled the land and how they were able to irrigate it. It's really, once you get your field set, you put water on it, it has been running across these fields with very little to no work. And it's just amazing to see how well it grows. There's a lot of times in the early days where the water was really dirty and it had a lot of brackish sediment in it. And it's filled these, put about between 2 feet and 36 inches of just mud and silt and debris out of the Virgin River onto all these parcels of ground throughout town. It's just amazing to see. At the top end of your field, you'll have 36 to 48 inches of sediment and fill that's just filled in over the years, and then at the bottom end you may have 18 inches of clay and mud that's came in out of the Virgin River. So in today's irrigation that comes crystal clear usually, depending on the storms upriver. And if it does get too murky, then they can actually shut that water off and divert water from like Quail Lake and out of the pipeline and put it into the system, so that it's actually a lot more sustainable. So it's just been amazing over the years to watch the changes and how they beat all the odds and got water onto the bench of the Hurricane Valley to build this community.
Yeah, it's incredible. If you take a look at, go back in the video and some of the slides I'm going to show you here later, you'll be able to see the canal on the side of the rim of the hillside coming through Hurricane and whatnot. We're trudging through the water now, as you can see. Let me get you some video on that. And over here, this is one of the ditches that Casey was just telling you about. And Casey said these ditches were built in they've been used since the 1960s?
Yeah, all these ones on this property have been here since the 1960s. They were actually built by my wife's grandfather, Bud R. Scow. And I'm sure he had plenty of help, because this would have been a lot of work to build these. And I'm sure at the same time they leveled and terraced all these fields so that it would irrigate. You know, and as things change in southern Utah and as growth happens, places like this are threatened and going to be lost to growth and development. And right now Hurricane City's in the process of switching to a pressurized irrigation system to reduce use and a few other things like that to accommodate growth. And so there's going to be a lot of changes happening in the agricultural ground in southern Utah, and this may be one of the last remaining strongholds of pressurized irrigation in the valley. And it'll be an interesting transition as we move forward with our growth and water and conservation. And so it was probably a good time to do a little clip on all of the changes and the history of the water in the Hurricane Valley. It was probably a good time to do a clip and to do a little video on the history of the water in the Hurricane Valley and how it made all of this possible. And it's slowly being eroded away to development and growth. And so it's good to preserve your history and know where it all started. And it's just kind of something I hold dear to my heart, to agriculture, and how important it is to our community, even on a small scale.
You know, it's important as we talk about the water that came into this valley. I mentioned that this water was the lifeblood to the growth of this area and throughout the desert Southwest, where it's so hot and dry. If there's no water, there's no sustainability. Anyway, going back to what I was saying, water is everything, and you need it in the desert to make anything live and survive. And what you hear a lot of times in the desert, or in the West, in the southwestern United States, is there's a water problem, there's a water shortage. And I would disagree. I think you have a growth problem. There's plenty of water in the desert Southwest. There's just not plenty to sustain the crazy amounts of growth that have happened. Obviously, the growth happened because of the invention of the air conditioner, which is another history lesson for another time. Anyway, let me walk you along this canal and show you kind of what it looks like, and then I'll take you over and show you how it works and what Casey does to water his field. So what you're looking at now this is the valve area, and I'm going to let Casey kind of explain to you what he does and how he makes this work so that he can irrigate his field.
So the first thing you have to do when you're irrigating, obviously, is find those old mucking boots and keep your feet dry. But when my turn comes around, I'm notified about 2 days beforehand, and she gives us so many hours depending on how many acres we're irrigating. And
here you can see the water running down through the ditch, and about, I don't know, 30 yards in front of us there's a board that Casey set up, and so half of the ditch is dry down there. And this ditch is wet, and you can see it's obviously flooding into the field behind it.
So when we're done irrigating this section of the field, we can just pull these boards out and send it down, and it'll hit the next section. And each individual section kind of takes a little bit different time. But like I say, after irrigating it all these years, you kind of know how much time you've got. And it can depend too on the flow. Sometimes the flow is not quite as good, or it's a little bit more. And so we kind of judge on, once it's to the bottom of the field, we usually shut it off. And what we're trying to do is get 1 inch of water on the ground to soak in, and then any of the water that runs off the property is return back into the surface aquifer in the Virgin River and then used further downstream in the Washington and St. George fields. And so that's the beauty of flood irrigation over pressurized, is the water isn't wasted when it returns back into the surface aquifer. And then another thing that pressurized irrigation doesn't do as well as flood irrigation is it doesn't recharge the groundwater. A lot of this water will soak in and recharge the system below where people rely on wells, and so it'll be interesting to see how that changes the groundwater recharge in Washington County when they finally eliminate flood irrigation. So this is a bulkhead in one of the ditches that has where you're able to install your diversion boards. So it says here, May 1959, Bud R. Scow. So he inscribed these ditches when they installed them. And it's pretty amazing. Over here on another ditch, it says Tess and Odessa plus Co. 1959. So he had his wife and some of his wife's friends down here installing, scrubbing mud, whatever they had to do to get these ditches installed to make their life so much better than irrigating with dirt dug ditches. It would have had to just been such a blessing to have the money and the know-how to get these concrete ditches installed 65 years ago.
65 years ago, how about that? And, you know, and he took the time to inscribe his name. Let's see if we can see that on camera a little bit. But there you go. There is a piece of history. It's 65 years old, and you may be thinking, well, that's not history. It's only 65 years. But to think about what it must have taken, I can imagine here in the summer heat, you know, you're 105, 110 degrees, and you're out here putting concrete channels in and the blocks there, and what hard work it would have been just to bring water to your area to irrigate.
So this is another concrete crossover that was built in 1964, and it's pretty cool to see my wife's grandma, Tess, and I think her friend Odessa, plus Co. 1964.
How about that?
That's pretty amazing.
How about that? And let me just show you the irrigation ditch that we're looking at here. Comes through a pipe there because it's on the back side of somebody's yard. You can see the fence behind him. But then it comes around here and works its way down. And you can see here's an area that would be irrigated. And again, you might be wondering, if you're not from this area and you're watching from somewhere else, we have viewers in England, which is incredible. But one of the things that you'll know is you could put in here, you could put cattle in here. Casey was just showing me some of his pigs. Of course, you've got these great big trees here, these pecan trees. They all need water to sustain themselves, and that's what the Hurricane Canal Company made possible over 100 years ago when they envisioned a canal system to bring water from the Virgin River Canyon down into the Hurricane Valley below and make this area sustainable. So anyway, thanks for watching. We hope you have we hope you enjoyed the show today. Until next time, enjoy your next road trip.